great to meet you. Thank you for taking a minute out for Neon Jazz. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. It's so great to talk to you, Joe.
Great to talk to you. Where are you coming out of?
I'm in Brooklyn.
All right. My
Yeah.
dad, it's so weird. My dad was born in Brooklyn in 48. So he told me all the stories about growing up there and the Bronx Tale and all of that, which is a different landscape now. But I remember one of the most solemn stories he ever told me when the Dodgers left. And because I was trying to get like a barometer of what people were feeling, he was like, it was the most morose feeling ever. Like they were dragging dummies through the streets behind cars that said LA, no way. And just, it was wild. They did
That's
not want Ebbets Field to go down.
that as a baseball fan, that hits hard because
Yeah.
I've been in Brooklyn for I've been in Brooklyn for about 8 years now, and man, I so badly want a baseball team to root for.
Man alive.
That's Brooklyn Center, and I live right next to the old field.
Yeah.
I'm near the museum,
Wow.
so I walk by it all the time where it's like, whatever building they have there now. And
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's where that used to, oh man, that's where the Dodgers, oh shoot, that would have been cool.
It's wild. The Chiefs used to be in a little stadium here in Kansas City up off 18th and Vine, and they have kind of this memorial there. And it was tiny, but it was still historic. And I wish they would have kept some of those old structures up. In fact, I just took my son to the first college football games that I've ever seen in my life at KU. And they're getting ready to renovate that stadium. And I remember thinking how cool it was because it was all old school. Like all the signage was from the 20s, like everything in there just looked totally antiquitous. And that's one of the things about living in this modern era. It's like all these owners feel like they have to facelift everything. And it's like, we can have a Wrigley and a Fenway. We don't need all this fancy stuff, man.
Yeah. And
You
so
know?
long as the building isn't falling over, like we can keep the old stuff or renovate it for new amenities
Yeah,
with that same old look and same old vibe.
totally.
Yeah, I hear you.
It's totally true. So, but at any rate, man, it's great to meet you. And I want to begin our conversation with what we kind of already touched on, which is living through a pandemic. And
Yeah.
that did its thing on all of this, especially the music community. How did you survive it? And how good does it feel to have an album out now?
Yeah. So I think for me, it was a lot about community, right? So I'm actually a part of a collective, a music collective where we all kind of write songs and we're part of the group together and no one's necessarily the leader. So when the pandemic started, we got on a Zoom call, and we said, hey, like, let's make a new tune, let's write something new for Friday, and we'll release it on Friday. We'll do a little video for it. It'll be a minute long. It'll be Instagrammable. It'll be shareable. Let's do that for this Friday. And then I think we made 64 of them before we finally gave, it was one of these things where we had that to look forward to every single week. And you can see, it's kind of fun to go and look back to see our progression as an ensemble, as a group. It's called Planetary People Transmissions, which is not the project that we're talking about today. But it's such a great thing to kind of go and look back. And we all got much better at writing and arranging, obviously, because we were having to make stuff for each other, and send off, a demo and say, all right, this is kind of what I want the bass to be like. Can we put something together like that? We got better at that. I got better at the video editing part because I ended up doing all the video editing. So the first versions are, me on iMovie, like trying to copy and paste different pictures in. By the end, we're doing big band charts, where I have everybody's little video on screen. And so that was a big part of it. And then another part of the community that really helped me get through was living in Brooklyn. I was never one for like jam sessions per se.
Yeah.
Like when I was in school, we would get together, obviously, and we had a community when I was in undergraduate and grad school where people would come together and play. And I was never really one for the open kind of jam session. And during the pandemic, in Brooklyn, there's this great bar called Bar by You. And there's some real heavy cats that come through there. It's this tiny little bar. And when they first opened up in New York, it was like 30% capacity, something like that. And I think the total number of people that could be in the bar at any given time was 11 when they first opened up. And so we're having this jam session where, well, there's a bartender and then there's the band. That's four. So there's like six people in the bar for this jam session. And it was kind of this really special thing where now all of a sudden, there's a local community of people and folks that are kind of in and out of, a jam session, albeit small, that you're playing with and that you're working together. And quite honestly, we're all kicking the dust off from not playing and performing in person for such a long time. And it was just this really wonderful kind of getting together. And now that session is super well attended. I can, sometimes you have to elbow your way through the door to get in. And it was just kind of a really special thing where now all of a sudden we have this, community that you're working with. And as things get lifted, you see those people around and you see them grow as musicians and artists. And it's really special.
Yeah. So it comes with the territories, the new album. Talk to me about what artistically went into this and just your general feeling about it.
Yeah. So this album, this was, coming off the pandemic and kind of getting back into normal musician things. A friend of mine who was, I don't want to use the word intern, but he was new at a very small recording studio. He was kind of like the second in command of a one-person studio in New Jersey. And he reached out to me and said, listen, like, I need guinea pig bands. I need someone to come in to try some stuff so I can deal with like these higher end clients that come in for like pre-production to this smaller studio. What are you doing in a month? And I said, well, we're recording an album in a month. That's what we're doing. And within 28, 30 days or so, I'd written all the music and hired the band, found players that I really want to work with and play with. And this is an opportunity to do it. And that's kind of where the name comes from, where it's like, hey, I'm an artist, right? Like, if you present me with an opportunity like this, if you give me studio time or an opening at a great studio like this, I'm going to jump at it. And it comes with the territory that you have to be ready for something like that. And even if you're not ready, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a really great experience to, like I say, just jump in and make something like that work.
Yeah. So what are you hoping the listener gets from this album?
Yeah, it's a really great question. I think at my heart, at the core of my music love is I'm a sentimental kind of guy. I love music that really gets you feeling something and really touches at the heart of the listener. At least when the listener is me, when I'm listening to somebody else's thing. That's part of the music I really, really love. And I'm hoping that, my music or one of the central elements of the way that I write and I think about my music is how I can bring a listener in and how I can get them involved, how I can show them instead of tell them. And my music, hopefully, and hopefully the listener hears this, centers around melodies that maybe get stuck in your head, grooves that you want to, wiggle your butt to, but maybe also stuff to think about and stuff to, that hits that kind of cerebral part of the listener too, right? So it's my hope is that it has a really great kind of mix of that. My hope is that it has a really great mix of simultaneously the feel part of music and also the thinking part of music.
So how did this journey into the jazz begin for you? Where were you born and raised, and how did you pick up, the jazz bug, early influences?
Yeah, so I grew up in Wisconsin, outside of Madison,
Okay.
in a little community called Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, and Sun Prairie is known for having a really good instrumental music program.
Yeah.
And so I started as a singer, actually. Don't ask me to sing anything. I started as a singer when I was very young and working in musicals and kind of getting involved in community theater. And then, I found a saxophone in my parents' basement, and I said, hey, Mom, what is this? Well, it's a saxophone. And we talked about it. And since then, it was just like, all right, I'm going to check this out. I'm going to see where this leads me. And I wasn't so committed early on until I got to high school. And Sun Prairie works with the Essential Ellington at Jazz at Lincoln Center, right? And they at the time they were getting more involved. Now they have a whole festival, Lincoln Center. I forget exactly what it's called, but it's the regional Lincoln Center or Jazz at Lincoln Center, essentially Ellington Festival or something like that. So I started to see how some of the older students in the bands were getting this really cool opportunity to go to New York, play this music in a really deep and really understood way. And I'm a freshman in college or in high school. I'm sorry, coming in, not knowing basically anything. I thought that story about Charlie Parker thinking there were 3 keys.
Yeah.
Whatever that was times 1,000. I didn't really understand anything, and I started to dig into it, started taking private lessons, got more and more invested and more involved. We got to do the Jazz at Lincoln Center thing. I'm standing on stage with Wynton Marsalis when I'm 17 or whatever. And after that, I went to that fueled the fire. And when I went to a Wisconsin state school and found this community of people who loved this as much as I did. And, I went to University of Wisconsin La Crosse, which isn't known for their music program, but the music community and the music scene, if you wanted to get involved in La Crosse, I mean, this is a city of 65,000 people with 3 jazz venues and a multitude of other, I was playing 5-6 nights a week and being a part of this community. And that's where it really got me and wanted to continue this journey. And jazz seemed like the way that my thoughts were expressing themselves.
Yeah.
And the improvisation part is a huge part for me as well.
So I'm sure being on stage with Wynton was quite a baptismal of getting into jazz. But let's reach in a little bit more. What was the first live jazz show that you ever saw that blew you away, that was like, man, I want to be up there one day, I'm doing that?
That's a good question. I think the one that sticks in my mind, the one that is like, I can't believe I got to see that, was Herbie Hancock with Michael Brecker.
Wow.
And Roy Hargrove. It's live at Massey Hall.
Yeah.
That tour I got to see and saw Michael Brecker do the EWI stuff and the loop pedals and stuff.
Wow.
And, I mean, I still think about that all the time. I go back to that record and just listen to Brecker's version of Naima.
Yeah.
If you check that out, it's just solo saxophone. It's unbelievable. That's the one that really sticks with me. Maybe not the first, but definitely probably the most impactful.
Massey Hall's where that seminal concert with Parker and Dizzy and all of that happened, correct?
I think so, yeah.
So from what I heard historically, that was a very low attended show. It was like one of the most unbelievable jazz shows ever. There was a boxing match that same night. Some big English dude was boxing somebody. I can't remember what it was, but they said that there was just not that many people. And I think the reason why they talked about it was because they didn't pan into the audience. They didn't want to make it look like it was sparsely attended, but that was what happened. So essentially it was like the night that the Beatles played on Ed Sullivan. Just
Right.
imagine Elvis playing across town or somebody else, and no one's going to go there because everybody's going to be waiting for the Beatles to come on Ed Sullivan, so.
And meanwhile, however many years later, we're thinking about it as this incredibly important moment in history.
Yeah.
Whereas at the time it was, okay, sure.
Yeah.
That happened.
Whatever. Yeah. And I've talked to like some of the old guard cats and I'm like, did you know what you guys were doing? Did you realize you were in the vortex of a tornado and there was just all of this activity going on? They're like, no, we were just playing. We just got together. Just, like they were having a cup of coffee. No big deal.
Right.
So it's the way it works. So, so in this journey of obviously loving what you do and loving the music and loving jazz, what do you look forward to the most every day? What do you like the best about being a professional musician?
There's kind of two kind of things that I would say to that. In terms of my day-to-day, right? In terms of sitting at this desk and practicing and working, I love the challenge. I love the putting the puzzle pieces together. I love figuring out, the really small granular details of like, okay, so how is this scale going to affect this particular part of the song, or figuring out how I might integrate this piece of material. Okay, I found a great Joe Henderson line. How am I gonna How about, that version of the puzzle and that way of like kind of thinking and figuring out how this music is constructed, and how I want to say what I want to say. I think my favorite thing in music is standing up on stage and not knowing what's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's this moment that in between, it could be in between a phrase that I'm playing, it could be in between or before a solo that I take. There's this split second where there's just infinite possibility reaching out into forever. I know I sound a little hyperbolic, but you have this, like, all of a sudden the door is wide open, and you take that first, maybe not first, but you take a breath, and anything might happen, and it's you might hear it, you might see it in your mind first, but it's happening basically in real time, and you get to experience this kind of along with the other musicians on stage and along with the audience. Again, not to be hyperbolic, not to be
No.
too dramatic about it, but
Yeah, I dig it.
uh,
Yeah. The one thing mentioning Dizzy is that it's very important for the legends and the elders of this craft to pass that torch on. Make sure that the younger generations grab onto this and keep the art form going. What is it that you try to do with younger players? How are you trying to pass that torch on?
yeah. So I actually, a lot of my business is teaching one-on-one students, and I love teaching one-on-one students. I think it's really important for musicians generally to have that kind of one-on-one attention with the teacher, and I tried my best to provide that. I think one of the things that I really hone in on and focus on is ways to introduce players that don't improvise to improvisation, getting them off the dots on the page if they're more experienced, or if they're just brand new to the instrument. How can I create with the things in front of me, with the tools that I have? And I think a lot about that. There's some great books and literature about kind of the mental side of that, but I really try to focus on, if you want to call it the physical, if you want to call it the what would I call it? The If you want to call it the practical part of improvisation, where it's you're practicing, you're actually doing it, you're making it. And as a more experienced player, I might have more tools at my disposal, but that doesn't stop anyone from being creative and creating something brand new and brand new and original to them. So that's kind of what I hope to pass along to younger players, is like, listen, like, let's create something, let's build something together. And making changes is great and an important part of playing jazz, but let's start at that kind of foundational level of using the tools that you have as a musician to create something that's uniquely you.
So I'm going to add a layer to a question I usually ask, which is, if you can get into a time machine and go back in time and see any musician or any show, where are you going? But I'm also going to add, of all of the modern cats that are around today, who haven't you seen live that you would love to catch live?
Oh man. Okay. So in terms of the time travel,
Yeah.
the time travel part of the question, right now, at least where my brain is right now, I want to go see Lester Young. I think
Yeah.
that's
The Prez.
uh you know the way that I teach it, at least, or the way that I talk about it in terms of that practicality element of improvisation, is like, Lester Young is like pre-bebop. He has all that language that Charlie
Yeah.
Parker has, but slowed down and bluesier and a little bit more practical for a younger musician. So let's start there. I mean, we can always play Coco at a super slow speed, which I think is one of the most impressive things about Charlie Parker, is that you can play those solos, you can play those lines at 60, and they still are like, man, that's a cool line. But Lester Young gives, so I would love to see that. I would love to
Yeah.
see he and Billie Holiday. I think that would
Oh
be,
man, those two. And
I mean,
I'd love to hear their mouths afterwards. I always hear that's how she got sassy, and they had sailor talk. So I'd love to hear them talking after the show.
he had he was the one that started some of the lingo, right? Like,
Yeah.
um, I don't know which book back there talks about it, but yeah, talking about like all the different ways that he would say, like, police officers are in the building or whatever it was.
And I mean, and I remember they used to get beat up a lot for the beboppers were kind of the new generations, and they used to call the old generation moldy figs or old figs or whatever. And I'm thinking maybe he came up with that too. But yeah, he invented a whole dictionary of terms.
Yeah.
So
Um, in terms of a musician that I would, okay, I got one. That I've never seen, because
yeah,
there's some folks that I would love uh, to see that I've seen many times before. Um, Wynton Marsalis. I
yeah,
think I don't think I've seen him. I might have seen him once, very briefly. I might be cheating on this game a little bit,
that's
but
okay.
I've heard that his like club date or smaller venue shows compared to the festival shows. I've heard that the smaller shows are unbelievable. They're just have that same energy of him playing at a festival, but are in an intimate space with several hundred listeners maybe instead of several thousand.
Delfeo came to Kansas City because there's a trombone maker here that's world renowned, and he got a really cool piece of stained glass put into it, and he played at the Blue Room, and that New Orleans swagger, that genealogy, that DNA crowning thing that lineage comes from, just shines. It's like they're born to like let it out and to be loud and to put it out there. So it's yeah,
That New Orleans style, it kind of always surprises me, if that makes
yeah,
sense. Like you think it's like, okay, I know what that's about, and then you
sure,
hear it live and you're like, maybe I don't know what that's about.
no.
Like that's a different experience than kind of the homogenized or generalized version maybe of that sort of style.
You know who blew me away recently? And it's not that they don't on recordings, but I saw him live. Miguel Zanon came in with his band, and it was a really tight knit group. And man, those guys, I mean, seeing that up front at that intensity for that long, I was like, wow, it was crazy. And that's the reason why this art form's so essential to fill the air with that vibration for everybody to feel it together. It's just a different way of experiencing improv.
For sure. I mean, Miguel Zanon, um, he, he scares me a little bit. Like
Yeah, I get it.
I don't know how he moves his fingers that fast. Like I genuinely don't know. Like
It's crazy.
from from the teacher brain part, right? Like not the artistic brain. Like his way of moving isn't this super the way he moves his fingers is not necessarily as ergonomic. But him and Mark Turner too is the same thing, where
Oh
they
man.
have this extra motion, but it doesn't. They hear it all in here first,
Yeah.
and they can. Yeah, Luis Perdomo is his piano player. Usually, I don't know if he
Yes.
was on that.
Oh my God, yes. And then he has gosh dang it, I can't remember the drummer's name, but yeah, Louis, and they've been together for a long time. So the drummer was a part of that same trio nuclei. So they were
Oh,
just all in sync from decades of being together, and it was crazy. I mean, like the way he was doing that was probably the closest that I could imagine seeing Bird do that in person, just to see that lightning, just everything moving.
that's a good analogy, because I feel like Miguel Zanon, um, the way he constructs his tunes is that you'll be in some insane meter and you might not even recognize it. And I feel like there's a similarity between what Charlie Parker did maybe with integrating blues lines.
Yeah.
Instead of blues lines this time, it's mixed meter and odd meter, and throwing all of that extra stuff at the listener at the same time, having this complete fluidity and mastery and control. And unless you're sitting there going, wait, 1, 2, 3, 4, then three, unless you're sitting there counting it out, like you don't even really it's just so fluid and um so lyrical.
Yeah. See, I come from a totally visceral standpoint. I've deliberately tried to not think in notes. I don't get technical with it. It's like there's so many things in this reality that I've delved into that are difficult. I want to be a fan of music. I don't want to do it. So that's me cerebral, like from a visceral standpoint, soaking in what's going on around me. And that was my feeling, especially being in Kansas City. He's at the Folly, he's downtown. Bird played in those blocks. It's like there's this spirit, and that's one of the things that's so emblematic of 18th and Vine. Like literally one of the reasons why I asked that question of like, where can you go? I've spent many times just standing on 18 and Vine or in that district thinking how many ghosts of jazz past are just going through the air, and Miles over here and Art Blakey. There's all of these things that you can grab onto that's kind of romantic about that era.
Yeah, we were just in Kansas City earlier this summer. I'm a sideman for a blues project under
Okay.
the name Betty Smith, and we
Okay.
we stopped. I think we actually played the Folly, the
Okay.
Folly. I think. Don't quote me on that.
Right.
Uh, but yeah, I totally felt that being in Kansas City. Compared to, it's a Midwestern kind of larger metro area, which reminds me of places like Milwaukee where I've spent a lot more time. But it does have this kind of, we walked into an after bar, and it's just this energy, this vibe of musicality and musicianship that is, I think it's really special. I
It's
wish
cool.
we would have spent more time,
Yeah.
because I feel like we could have really, given a couple of days, really dug deep into some of that history, and not just the big marquee stuff, which is obviously always really wonderful to see, but what's happening on the ground level in terms of musicians in the area just playing a bar gig, or supporting another act. Like, that's always really interesting to me, how that kind of manifests within a scene.
Yeah, the Kansas City community is very good about that. Everybody, that's the silver lining. Everybody's very supportive. Everybody's just, and the musicianship, it's surprising when we need to rename our motto to like rendezvous, because people always want to come back, just
Yeah.
and be a part of it. So at the end of the day, everyone has a perception of you: family, friends, fans, those cats that you play with, students, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Ooh,
This is the therapy
give it.
question. Who do you think you are?
um I think I think as a musician, uh I think I'm someone who, you might have to do some editing while I think about, cut out some of this silence. um I think I'm someone who brings um a mentality of, I don't want to say pop music, but popular music,
Yeah.
um to this genre, to jazz. And um like I say, I love improvisation. It's the most important thing to me. Before I'm a saxophone player, I feel like I'm an improviser, and that spontaneity. But man, am I a sucker for a whistleable melody, or a groove that really hits and sinks deep. I think there's a lot of other musicians that are doing this, obviously, but bringing those two elements together and not compromising on either is kind of the goal that I have for myself, for my own music. And I hope to, in terms of like my in terms of a teacher and being someone who wants to spread this music, it's one of the most important things to me that this music gets permeated, and people aren't, you know afraid of it. No, that's a weird way to say that. Maybe people aren't so intimidated by our music, because there's nothing to be intimidated by, in my opinion. Bringing those sorts of people in and saying, like, hey, like, this is fun, this is entertaining. If you
Yeah.
buy in a little bit, there's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah.
There's nothing to be intimidated by. Like, come with me, come, like, join me. And like, I hope to bring that to students too, because like I say, I think a lot about how to bring younger players, or less experienced players, into improvisation. What an important part um, of the um, what an important part of how this music gets passed on,
Yeah.
I guess.
Yeah. Absolutely. So if anyone wants to pick up, it comes with the territory, any of your other works, live shows, where can they go?
It Comes with the Territory is out on December 1st on Bandcamp, through Ears and Eyes Music. This is my first time working with Ears and Eyes, and they've been fantastic. They don't release stuff on streaming right away, so you have to go to Bandcamp to check it out. And what a great way to support music and musicians is monetarily.
Yeah.
So you can check it out there. It will be out streaming in early next year. You can see all of my other materials are out and streaming on wherever you get music. We are playing in Manhattan on December 11th for the CD release, along with Michael Sarian, trumpet player, and Caroline Davis.
Oh,
So
cool.
that should be a really exciting show. Very excited about that. That's December 11th in New York. And you can check it out all on my social medias, Jim.Piela, wherever you social media, it should be there.
Caroline was one of my first interviews I ever had on the show. She lived in Chicago at the time and moved. Michael's been on a few times, so if you remember, tell him I send my best.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
Yeah.
Michael and I, we're close. We work together a lot. Do you know what he's doing right now?
What's that?
He's on tour with the Jonas Brothers.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, I mean, yeah, do it.
I mean, he's got the chops. He's got the style, right? Like
Yeah,
off to the races.
yeah. He's a very blended cat. That's for sure.
For sure. I'm just trying to catch up. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
right. Yeah, we're all trying to catch up to him for sure. Hey, man, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for taking time out. Thank you for your story, for your music, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you so much. My pleasure. It was great to meet you. Great to talk.
Absolutely.